Tonight, Beyonce actively working to convert Americans to paganism. Yeah, that's just one of the bizarre, often controversial statements from the head of the Michigan GOP. Statements uncovered by CNN's K-File. Christina Caramo most recently faced harsh backlash for defending this highly offensive tweet, comparing gun control to the Holocaust. Well, now CNN's K-File has uncovered a long history of eyebrow-raising comments, including this one about Beyonce.
She's really trying to target Black people into embracing paganism. And one of the really interesting things is that her husband, Jay-Z, is, many people have said, is a Satanist. I believe it to be true.
I mean, I don't even know how you answer that, right? Out front now, the senior editor of CNN's K-File, Andrew Kaczynski, and Harry Enton, who has some eye-opening numbers on how election deniers like Christina Caramo are faring with voters. So, Andrew, let's start with you. In terms of what you uncovered, I have to say, I heard that Beyonce Jay-Z moment, and I'm just left speechless. What else did you find in terms of these past outlandish statements?
So Caramo sort of came onto the scene in 2020 when she was a poll watcher, and she claimed there was fraud in Detroit. People probably remember Trump was really making many of these poll watchers who made these false allegations of fraud almost like celebrities. And she parlays this into running for Michigan Secretary of State in 2022. She loses badly. But prior to this, in 2020, she had this podcast where she posted videos, made comments. And I just want to run through for our viewers just some of the things that she said here. She accused Beyonce, Jay-Z, Ariana Grande, and Billie Eilish of being tools of Satan, said the sexual revolution was a well-orchestrated, thought-out plan by Satan, said Black Lives Matter was nothing but Marxism and Satanism in blackface, accused Black Lives Matter leaders of being Marxist witches, said she doesn't believe in vaccines, called abortion child sacrifice, and said acceptance of LGBTQ Americans and gay Americans, transgender Americans would eventually lead to the normalization of pedophilia. I want people to listen to also this clip here where she suggests that demonic possession is transferred via sexual intercourse.
If a person has demonic possession, I know it's going to sound really crazy me saying that for some people. They're gonna be like, what? But having intimate relationships with people who are demonically possessed or oppressed, I strongly believe that a person opens themselves up to possession. Demonic possession is real.
Wow.
And
It just leaves me speechless to hear I mean, she says this is what she believes, but this is a woman who's now the head of the Republican Party in
Michigan,
the state.
right? And it's interesting. Why is this important? Well, it's very important to Republicans in Michigan because this is a state that Republicans, they play in. This is a state that recently had a Republican governor. This is a state that Donald Trump won in 2016. But last cycle, which they're running against the backdrop of an unpopular Democratic president, they lost the top 3 seats. They lost the governor, attorney general, secretary of state. Her loss was the most lopsided one, 14 points. And what is the state party chair supposed to do? They're supposed to get out the vote. They're supposed to help fundraise. They're supposed to help local candidates. And there are serious questions if somebody who's made these comments as an activist is going to be able to do that job effectively. We did obviously reach out to her before we did this story, and we didn't hear back.
Yeah, and I think you lay out so beautifully there why it's so important that we pay attention to these comments. So, Harry, when we look at this, she is a prominent election denier, as we know.
Yeah.
As Andrew pointed out, she lost that state race in 2022. What do the numbers tell us about how election denial played with voters?
It didn't. It played quite poorly, right? Andrew was kind of pointing it out. We all went into this midterm election. A lot of folks like me, you saw President Joe Biden's approval rating in the low 40s. You say, Republicans are going to do very well because there's normally a backlash against unpopular presidents. But they didn't. Why? Well, look at the electoral penalty that voters assign to those who believed in election denialism. 5 points in the margin. 5 points in the margin in major statewide 2022 races. And while 5 points may not seem like a lot, in states like Michigan, in states like Arizona, states like Georgia, close states, that 5 points can make all the difference in the world.
And specifically if you're talking about the Senate, right? Senate was super important, as we know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And our exit polls had an interesting question. They basically rated the Democratic and Republican candidates, said, Do you view them as too extreme? And what happened in those races? It turns out in the vast majority of the competitive races, more voters in those key battleground states said that the Republican candidates were too extreme as compared to the Democratic candidates. So the fact is, this is not just something that, we just see in the polling data. It's something we see in the real election data. Election denialism, simply put, does not play with the American public.
There's a lot of talk about the impact of Donald Trump on the candidates he endorsed in 2024. But as we look ahead to 2022, as we look ahead to 2024, he's a candidate leading in the polls right now among Republicans. What effect has this base first strategy of his had, this election denialism, on how the general public views him?
Yeah, it's something that's so interesting. When you look back on 2016, I think a lot of people forget that more voters actually said that Donald Trump was moderate than Hillary Clinton. Look at the percentage of voters or Americans, adults at large, who said that Trump was very conservative back in 2016. Look at that. It was only about 20% among those who had an opinion. Look at it now. It's over 50%. So the fact is, Trump's statements have certainly had an impact, and not in a good way. Voters are now much more likely to view him as extreme.
Harry, Andrew, nice to have you both here tonight. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.